Hello, geometry students. You are about to take a quiz on coordinate geometry, and this review will make sure that you're ready. Our art today is a portrait of one of my students, and it is courtesy of Bree in my algebra class. So, how is slope calculated? Well, slope is calculated as y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 for any 2 points. And the order doesn't matter. So if you're given 2 points, which one is x1, y1, and which one is x2, y2 won't make any difference in your slope. The slopes of parallel lines or line segments are equal, and the slopes of perpendicular lines are opposite reciprocals. And what that means is that if you have some slope a over b, then the slope negative b over a is the opposite reciprocal. So whatever the sign of this one is, positive or negative, the sign of its opposite reciprocal is the opposite sign. So if this one's positive, this one's negative. That's the opposite part. The reciprocal part says that you take the fraction and the numerator moves down into the denominator and the denominator moves up into the numerator. So it's flipped upside down. That's the reciprocal part. All right, now on to some examples. Problems 4 through 8 are going to use these points A through D, A, B, C, and D. First question is, are A, B, and C, D parallel, perpendicular, or neither? So I'm going to figure out the slope of line segment AB. So I need to determine x1, y1, and x2, y2. Doesn't matter which. So line segment AD, the slope. And I'm going to do a y1, 3, minus y2, negative 8, over x1, negative 3, minus x2, 9. 3 minus a negative 8 is 11. Negative 3 minus 9 is negative 12. The slope of, oh, that was AB. I apologize for that. AB. And now CD, the slope, will be, let's do that in a different color, actually. Let's do that in red. And so this will be x1, y1, and x2, y2. So y1, negative 6, minus y2, 1, over x1, 2, minus x2, 4, and that will be negative 7 over negative 2, which is the same as 7 over 2. Those two fractions are not equivalent, so the line segments are neither parallel, and they are also not opposite reciprocals, so they're not perpendicular, so they are neither. Moving on to the next one, I'm going to get rid of my x1, y1, x2, y2, and because we're using different segments here. So we're going to start with AC, the slope. And so we'll do x1, y1, and x2, y2. y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 will be 8 over negative 5. Excuse me, that's 9. 3 minus a negative 6 is going to be 9 over negative 5. And for BD, the slope will equal, setting up my x1, y1, and x2, y2, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 will be negative 9 over 5. And these two fractions are equivalent. They're both equal to negative 9/5. So they're parallel line segments. The last one here, AD, x1, y1, x2, y2, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 is going to be 2 over negative 7. And then CD, so I'm going to do x1, y1, x2, y2. The slope will be y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. That will be negative 7 over negative 2, which is 7/2. Those negatives here, they cancel and make a positive. So this is a negative and this is a positive, so they're opposites. And we've taken the numerator and it's moved to the denominator, and the denominator is moved to the numerator. So we flip that fraction upside down. They're reciprocals. They're opposite and reciprocals, so they are perpendicular. All right. Those are focusing on parallel, perpendicular, and neither. These next problems are going to be focusing on distance and then midpoint. The distance between points A and D. Distance is equal to the square root. Let's see, I'm going to make A x1, y1 and D x2, y2. So x1 minus x2, quantity is squared, and we're adding to that y1 minus y2, and that quantity is squared. And so I'm going to put the stuff under the square root into my calculator. And when I do that, I'm going to make sure that I put in those parentheses right here. Otherwise, I'm going to get some errors there and there. And when I do that, I get this square root of 53. And then I take that square root and put that in my calculator, and I get about 7.28 units. And that's how we find the distance. The midpoint between A and D, we take the x values and we average them, -3 plus 4 and divide by 2. That's how we take the average of two numbers, add them together, divide by 2. And the y values, 3 plus 1 divided by 2. And that gives us the point 1/2, because -3 plus 4 is 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So the x value of this is our midpoint. The x value of our midpoint comes from -3 plus 4 divided by 2, averaging the x values. The y value of our midpoint comes from taking the y values of our 2 points and averaging them, 3 plus 1 divided by 2. All right. Now, on these next ones, these are what I would consider the A-B level problems. And so you're going to everyone needs to be able to do those first 8. And if you can do these other ones, then you're going to be getting an A or a B. If you can do all of them, you get an A, obviously, on the quiz. So we're going to find a point R that will make N the midpoint of segment LR. So the idea is that we have some segment LR, and the midpoint is the point N. And so the way that we do that, remember, the midpoint is an average of our x values for the x part of the midpoint. and an average of our y values for the y part of the midpoint. So if we have some r that is x2, y2, then we can take L, x1, y1, average the x values, 2 plus the x2, that's the y value, x value of our r, and divide by 2, and that has to equal the x value of our n, -2, because our n is our midpoint. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2 in order to get rid of this fraction over here. These will make a 1. And so we'll have 2 plus x sub 2 is equal to -4. Subtracting 2, and we get x2 is equal to -6. And then to find the y value of our midpoint, we're going to take our y1, that's 4, and add to it y2, which we don't know, divide it by 2, so that's taking the average of our two y values, and the result must be the y value of our midpoint, which is n, so it's got to be -5. Now to get rid of that fraction, we're going to multiply both sides by 2. Again, that'll make a 1 right there. So we'll have 4 plus y sub 2 is equal to -10. Subtracting 4, we'll get y sub 2 is equal to -14. So our point R must be the point -6 from right here, and -14 from right here, and that is our endpoint R. Next, we're going to find a point P that will make LM parallel to NP. So what we're going to do first, we're going to think about some point P that is going to be x2, y2. And LM, we're going to find the slope of LM. So x1, well, let's not think about P yet. Ignore that for just a moment. So LM is going to have, we're going to make L x1, y1, M x2, y2. So y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2 will be 1 over -4. So -1/4 is our slope of LM. So we have our point N right here, and we know that our slope is 1 over -4, which equals -1 over 4, either one of those, or -1/4. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to focus on this, and because it equals delta y over delta x. Remember, that's what slope is, delta y over delta x. So if we take our point n is -2, -5, and we go down, down 1, that's our delta y, and we go right 4, that's our delta x. Our point P here must be right 4 will be -2 plus 4 will be +2. Down 1 from -5, the y value, will be -6. So that's one way of doing that. You could also put it on a graph, but I'd like to see that algebra. If you need the graph to go along with it, you should include that as well. So now we're going to find a point P that will make LM perpendicular to NP. So this time, we already have our slope of LM. So the slope of LM, the slope is equal to -1/4, which again is delta y over delta x. The slope of NP must be +4/1. It's got to be the opposite. So this is a negative, so we need a positive. And then we take the fraction, we flip it upside down. So again, remember that this is delta y over delta x. This says go up 4 and right 1. So from the point n, which is -2, -5, up 4 will give me a y value of -1. Right 1 will give me a y value of -1. And that will be my point P. And that is what you need to know to ace your quiz today. Good luck.